Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Normally I do a wrap-up video after every show, but I do it from my home and I'll have my backdrop where I'll put in some excerpts from the show as I talk about brands and kind of give my quasi awards or favorites or highlights. And I'll still do that when I get back. But this show was so big and had so much to go over. I don't think it's, and usually those videos are already 30 minutes. I wanted to do something right now to get some of the macro takeaways that aren't related to specific rooms and awards. Some of the macro takeaways from this show I think are even more important than specific room awards, because from a sound quality perspective, this wasn't the show to judge empirically the best sound quality demos, the noise floor, busyness, sweet spot I couldn't get to. It's very hard for me to say this was a better room than this room when I never got in the sweet spot, never got to do certain things. It's just not fair. But there's still so much value from this show. I wanted to talk to you guys about some of the macro takeaways. And real quick, getting the elephant in the room out the way, PS Audio thing, I didn't realize that was going to be such a big deal, but just saw them in the lobby after the show. They were having dinner in the restaurant and they called me over and thanked me for putting the second video up. And we didn't go into the weeds of what was the problem, but just know that it was much more complex in terms of out of phase and cabling than just red and black being swapped. What met the eye looked like everything was set up properly, but not getting into all the details or point fingers and all that. But it was a little bit more complex, but basically the cabling and the some things being out of phase was part of the issue, like I suspected, but just wasn't as easy to diagnose as traditionally out of phase are. And I've mentioned this at other shows. In fact, in Dallas, we went into a room where the speakers were out of phase. It's a common thing, nothing that you can, and I've seen it on the most expensive speakers in the hobby, internally wired out of phase. So this is nothing that you should attribute to a brand. Yes, mistakes happen. Yes, they shouldn't happen. Guys, everybody makes mistakes. So unless it becomes a pattern or people would deny that it happened, they responded to it for most of the show. You got to hear it properly and you could judge the gear a lot better. It was still a tough room, but sounded so much better the second time. And you can definitely see the potential of that speaker in the right room, right setup. Yeah, it was getting exceptional performance relative to show environment, was up there with any other room once they fixed everything. But let's talk about some other macro takeaways from this situation. The bigger things are not so much whether it's PS Audio, what happened, or any of that. Thing is, number one thing is, you can't judge things by my YouTube videos, because I tried to play it back on it sounded a lot better on video than it did in real life. In fact, I just had another cable manufacturer stop me. He's like, I went into that PS Audio room on Friday. I had to run out. It was hurting my ears. You know, people knew there was a problem. And you could tell in the video because of it was empty and everything else was packed. But the point is, what you hear on my videos is not as bad or as good sometimes as it is in real life. Especially in the bass area, you're just not going to be able to get that with whatever you're playing it back on, earbuds and stuff. You're not getting low bass, and plus the recording mic and other compression and stuff like that is going to give you just a fraction of that. Even when I go home, I was live, I go home, I listen on one of the best headphone rigs in the world, Stax X9000 Blue Hawaii head amp. I know it's not the same as being there, okay guys? So trust me on that. You got to have that takeaway. Don't trust the YouTube videos to make your decision. It's just something to give you at least some cause for exploring further and doing your own demos. The other takeaway is just, if you're at a show, don't make a knee-jerk blame the gear every time you come out and hear something terrible, especially if it's really bad. That's when I knew it wasn't the gear. I know that these are capable people. The designer of that speaker is capable. It couldn't be that bad without something being wrong. And I was trying to diagnose it on the fly, but like I said, it wasn't something so obvious that it could be that I knew for sure what it was, but they took care of it. You just have to realize when it's usually the room, it's usually lack of treatments, glass, noise floor, volume being wrong. When you hear something bad, don't just arbitrarily blame the gear and the brand. And it's another macro takeaway I wanted to talk about is I know in my journey, I didn't always know what out of phase speakers sounded like. Probably a couple of decades ago, I spent a lot of time. You'll see a book in the back of my backdrops of, recording engineers, sound, learning how to diagnose sound, learning frequencies, learning what's in phase, out of phase. A lot of people, they'll swear they can hear, XYZ fuse or chord or this little tweak or that little tweak, but they don't know what out of phase speakers sound like. Take care of the basics, fundamentals first. Invest some time in knowing what an out of phase speaker sounds like. And you can do that with just a test CD. There's plenty of them on streaming. We'll have a phase test, and you can tell what in phase and out of phase sounds like. If you want to, turn off your amp. Be sure to turn it off, and then swap the leads on one speaker, black and red or positive, negative. Swap it on one speaker, then play something. You'll hear what out of phase sounds like. And especially if what I learned it from is setting up home theaters. I spent tons of time on setting my home theater. Imagine trying to get just not the front two speakers in phase, but rears and all these other speakers, subs, plus center. That's when you'll learn how to train your ears for something to be in phase. Because you don't want to be one of those guys taking out an SPL meter to think that something's in phase. Do not do that, guys. It's almost worthless unless it's for bass. And you're playing a test tone at the frequency of the crossover. That SPL meter is going to do nothing. Your ears can tell you when something's in phase or not in phase. Trust me, guys. Learn that. If you don't know that right now, that's something you want to learn before you start talking about how you heard a direction of a fuse change, okay? But getting off of that topic, let's talk about a more macro topic. And one of the takeaways, well, I'm probably going to save this for one of my favorite rooms, but having breakfast with Daniel with Audio Note brings in a very macro point about measurements and what we hear, and it piggybacks on what I've been talking about. And you might think I'm more of an objectivist, measurement guy. Well, I do like measurements when I can get them what's going in my ear, like the Bach does. But like for Audio Note, I tend to agree with them. They don't really stress specs. 130 dB signal to noise ratio DAC versus 125 versus 120. These are all meaningless specs for our ears. They're great to show engineering acumen for that particular purpose, but Audio Note prioritizes other things, and such that they have their own ecosystem, and they create everything from cartridge to turntable to amps, DACs to speakers. And so that is why I think if you embrace their philosophy and like what you hear, you'll get two things. You should just go ahead and get everything from them, number one, to make that synergy real and get the most potential. But the other thing is that a lot of brands will bring a speaker that's not proper for the room. And so you get a low floor. You could get a potentially high ceiling of performance of that speaker if you put it in a great room and in your home, but you're at the show, it's a low floor because it's mismatched with the wrong type of room. Audio Note works with the environment they're given, and they have these speakers that will work in any environment and give you a high floor of performance. Putting speakers in the corner, you can't do that with any speaker, but they have done some research to, maximize the potential. You can argue that those speakers obviously aren't going to outperform a Magico M9 in a perfectly dedicated room, but for most people, that speaker in the corner is going to give you a higher floor of performance than the wrong speaker in the wrong room. And I like that philosophy because, again, not every brand is for everybody. But this is a company that values engineering, but it's not poor specs in certain areas because they're using cheap Chinese parts. You look under the hood, it's purpose-built for a reason. So if you believe in their philosophy, you like their sound, you want that high floor of performance, that's a great brand to look at. And that's the kind of things you want to diagnose at these shows, and not just empirically, do a primitive analysis. So big props to Audio Note. I'll probably mention them in my other wrap-up of best rooms. But also what was fun is bonding with Daniel, the son of Peter, who's the owner of Audio Note, both Gorillaz fans. And that's another takeaway from this show. Great music. I was very impressed. And like I've said before, if anybody puts together a title or Qobuz playlist from this show of what was played in my videos, kind of takes going through all my videos to get them. But put together a playlist, send me the link. I'll give you free membership access to my WhatsApp group, which is a lot of fun to be in. But yeah, there was a lot of cool covers that I really didn't hear before. The only things that are starting to get a little overdone is Liberty, but sometimes I even request it because I know it so well, and it does provide a level of reference for me. But Dominic Fields, Emil, gosh, guys, she's so good. She's got more tracks than just Birds, okay? Play some of the other ones too. That's getting a little bit overplayed. But otherwise, yeah, I was very impressed. In fact, in one of my last demos, the Dolly video, the demo, they had For Duke, a direct-to-disc recording, which Steve McCormick was involved with. And you've seen him on my channel, and longtime subscribers will remember the Zoom I did with him. For Duke was played, the direct-to-disc LP, kind of rare. Got to hear that at the show. So great music at this show. And it piggybacks into another thing. The show organizers and the vibe at this show is just exceptional. The best. I mean, I am putting this on my mandatory I go to all the shows anyway, but if I have to rank shows and if I ever have to cut back, the ones that support the press the best and the ones that do have the greatest, brands and the vibe and the whole thing was just a family in quotes oriented type thing. That gala that I did some YouTube shorts from, people pay to go to that gala on top of the membership. The renting the rooms. This is not cheap, and they want to go. They want to support it, and they have awards for each time I've gone now in Toronto here. A couple awards, industry awards, and it's so good seeing that positiveness and that camaraderie in an event, and a lot of fun too. So, and you get to mix with other people at your table. So yeah, it was great. One of the people at my table actually won one of the awards. And also I sat next to people from Sim Audio, and I got one person from PMA Magazine. Great event, great networking with these people. Definitely a must-see show for anybody. And I don't know why the U.S. press isn't here. And that piggybacks onto another thing. What were here were a lot of the Canadian YouTubers. I saw Adrian, Jay, Yagi, Jay with Jay-Z Yagi, that's not his last name, and Thomas. And all high quality guys. I can't say I watch all of their videos, but I can pretty much recommend them because they're just, I've got the intuition now that they're doing a good job. And a lot of them are actually making products now, or Adrian has a dealership. I feel good about recommending these guys based on my interactions with them. And actually Thomas's stuff performs really well. I've seen that a few times. And then the demo you saw with Adrian, that was great. So yeah, props to those guys. Great seeing them. And hopefully more will come from the US next year, because this is definitely a show to see. I'm gonna have a lot more when I get back. Plus this, actually talking about Audio Note, I had a home in Manhattan on the way up here. Console built, cost no object horn system. You will not believe the level of performance, but it goes back to purposely using the room, and I'm not going to spoil it. This is one of the best rooms I've ever been in, without doubt. And also, real quick, Axpona's next on the schedule. Bach is going to be there with ORC, the optimal room correction, in-ear, head tracking, 3D crosstalk cancellation. You're going to want to... Edgar, we're talking, I think he says it's 3 a day he's doing installs. That means we're selling 3 a day. You're going to want to get on the list. If you want to do a dedicated demo, I can do before hours or after hours. In all my videos, other than these that I upload streaming, you can see my contact information. So reach out to me if you want a dedicated demo at Axpona. He'll also be giving a talk, so don't miss us there. Your chance to hear the Bach firsthand instead of just all these awards that it's been getting and my anecdotal feedback. All right, guys, had a great time. Glad to see many of you here, and I'll see you back here soon.